Hey guys, how's it going? It's Al. We are back. It is football season. I know that I haven't put out a lot of content recently. I hope that you guys are safe during these very tough and trying times, but we're going to do what we can to talk about some fantasy football to try and get you prepared for this fantasy draft season that starts in just 2 weeks. This video, we're going to talk about all the must-own running backs at various ADP points, and I have a special guest on the show today. I've got Adam Levitan. We have no video for him, but we might in the future. Hopefully we can get that bug worked out, but I have him on a Zoom call here. You're going to hear his voice. I'm going to ask him a ton of questions. Adam, if you don't know, is from establishtherun.com. There is going to be a link down below in the comments section where you can buy to take you to their site to get a subscription, whether it's for the draft kit, the in-season DFS, or their NBA product. You can always get a 10% discount by using promo code SMIZLIFE at checkout. We're going to hit on these running backs here and give you guys that both I and Adam think are players that you really should focus on at various points in your draft. So Adam, how you doing today, man?
Yeah, I mean, gift to the people, not seeing my face, so I'm feeling good. I prefer radio and podcasts, anyways.
You got a face made for radio, is what you're trying to tell me? Well, we are going to try and take a look at some of these running backs. So the first thing that we have to do, to me, is talk about the 800-pound gorilla in the room, because there's been discussion that I've seen, and there's, people want content is king, and people are going to push out content to talk about this player or that player. And sometimes they talk about things like, if you have the number one pick, you don't have to take somebody like Christian McCaffrey. I disagree. I think you kind of have to take Christian McCaffrey anytime that you have a chance to go get him. It just makes sense to take him as he sits as the 1.1. The thing is, he is so absolutely dominant at that position. We've seen him do it no matter what quarterback was there. He did it with Cam Newton at quarterback. He did it with Kyle Allen at quarterback. They certainly had trouble moving the ball last year. My thing is, I don't think that defense is going to be good enough this year to really make them not have to throw the ball. And the more they have to throw it, the better it is for Christian McCaffrey. I've read articles, well, you could take Saquon Barkley. You could make arguments that somebody else is going to be the RB1. But to me, it's not about him being the RB1 at the end of the year, because if he ends the year as the RB4 and you invest that number one pick in him, that's good enough, because you're getting value in this spot. Obviously, running back, the most volatile position. And this year, especially 2020, with all the things that are going on, even more volatility added to every position, including running back. To me, Christian McCaffrey, if you get the 1.01, don't overthink it. He is the must-have running back on the board.
Yeah, so I think the best argument against Christian McCaffrey is that a guy who played 95, 96, 99, 100% of the snaps last year under the Ron Rivera, Norv Turner regime may not see it that way. Matt Rule and Joe Brady may not see it that way. But regardless, even in a spot where he gets 85% of the running back snaps, and given what they have behind him at the running back position, it would be shocking for him to get less than 80 or 85% of snaps. Christian McCaffrey is an absolute smash at number one overall. I think Joe Brady, what we saw at LSU is he does not ask his running backs to pass block. His goal is to get his running backs out into routes. Teddy Bridgewater, new quarterback for the Panthers, loves to check the ball down. It's just a really, really nice fit. And yeah, game flow independent running backs who also have a goal line role. You could say the same thing for Saquon Barkley. Maybe you could say the same thing for Ezekiel Elliott. Maybe you could say the same thing for Alvin Kamara, but there's just not that many of them. And Christian McCaffrey is set up by far the best. A lot of those other guys, Tony Pollard is good and Latavius Murray is good. And Saquon has questions about schedule and offensive line. And it's really hard to poke any holes in Christian McCaffrey at all. So yeah, to Al's point, it'd be really hard for a healthy Christian McCaffrey to finish much worse than the RB5 at the end of the season.
Yeah, and I'll pay for that certainty with the 101. Everybody else, everybody at running back's got question marks, some more than others. A guy that has people trying to make reasons why they should not take him, to me, is Kenyan Drake, who has been absolutely outstanding when he's been given the ball. Right? We've seen him do very, very well when he has been given the carries. And if you look at his splits last year in games where finally he went to Arizona and they featured him, his numbers were off the charts. You're talking about 19.93 PPR points per game versus 9 when he was on Miami. You're looking at what was it? 20 touches per game when he went to Arizona in that spread offense. And I'm a big believer in second-year quarterbacks and what they can do to an offense, right? You get that second-year quarterback, they grow. Obviously, this year it's going to be different because they couldn't work out. They didn't have the full offseason of normal things that every other second-year quarterback has had. But the leap in the second-year quarterback, the efficiency in the offense, all those things bode well for somebody who was made the featured back once he got traded for or acquired by the Cardinals. And then they traded off David Johnson to the Texans. Now it's his job. So to me, he's got enough goal line, great work in the passing game. I don't need 22 or 23 carries. If he gets 15, that's enough. It's along with the 3 to 5 catches that I think he should get per game. And he's being drafted right now as the RB9 going around an ADP of 12.5. So if you're at the turn and you want a running back with your first couple of picks, you can get him in the early second round sometimes. I think that there's definite value there with him, and I would prefer him to a couple of guys. I have him personally as my RB6 or RB7, depending on the day and how I feel, which direction the wind's blowing. And I know that there's some discussion on this. There's a lot of places that don't believe that he is, should be ranked that highly, but I have him that high. I'm really high on Kenyan Drake. He's somebody that I'm kind of hanging my hat on at the end of the first round or just beyond.
Yeah, I think from a draft strategy perspective, running back is what you're going to want to look at in rounds 1 and 2 because the wide receivers available in rounds 3, 4, 5, 6 are just outrageous, And when you're comparing guys like Leonard Fournette, who were really low on, and other kind of dusty running backs against guys like Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf and Adam Thielen and Juju Smith-Schuster and guys like that, of course you're going to want to prioritize running back from a position scarcity perspective, late first, early second, and that's where Kenyan Drake fits in. People think Kenyan Drake came out of nowhere. Kenyan Drake went to Alabama. Kenyan Drake was no slouch in terms of talent. He was just not used properly by the Miami Dolphins, where nobody was. I mean, Adam Gase was Ryan Tannehill's coach, and Ryan Tannehill did nothing. Adam Gase kind of held Jarvis Landry down some. Adam Gase, a lot of guys, Devontae Parker, and now Kenyan Drake too. So yeah, I think that talent is not really an issue with Kenyan Drake. And I also like the way that rushing quarterbacks like Kyler Murray set up their run game. We've seen extreme, even though their offensive line is not that talented, and we have offensive line specialist Brandon Thorne, he does not like the talent on Arizona's offensive line. True. The scheme that they're able to run, though, produced incredible efficiency last year through Kenyan Drake. So I like it. Obviously, there's some downside with a guy like Kenyan Drake who will see some heat from Chase Edmonds. And Benjamin, they drafted in the 7th round, I think can play a little bit. But there's, holes you can poke at the running back position once you get past that first 4 in almost every single one. At some point, you're going to need running backs on your team. Like, ideally, I'd love to run a team of all wide receivers outside the top 4. It's not practical. You have to start running backs. And so I think Kenyan Drake, I agree with Al that late 2nd round, I would not take Kenyan Drake over Michael Thomas or Devontae Adams. But a lot of the other wide receivers, I think Kenyan Drake is a better play than.
So the next player that I wanted to talk about was going to be James Conner, somebody that I think is coming in at a little bit of a value based on a couple of things. One, he does have a pretty spotty injury history. Granted, I give you that. I give everybody that. That's fine. I'm not arguing with his injury history. But you look at his numbers when he played with Ben Roethlisberger versus when he played without him. Obviously, the quarterback play in Pittsburgh was horrific last year. But in the games that he's played with Ben the last 2 seasons, 20.5 PPR points per game. That's 5 more than he gets in the 8 games when Ben did not play while he played. You're talking about 12 more receiving yards per game. You're talking about 17 more rushing yards per game. And obviously, with the efficiency that offense shows, he's going to be in more positions to get touchdowns, and we've seen how much they feed him once they get inside the 5-yard line because he has been good. And that is, you wrote an article about running back efficiency being tied to more opportunities inside the 5 than just about anything else. And here we have a guy with an offense that should be improved, that efficiency should be improved, where opportunities inside the 5 and inside the 10 should increase this year. And if he stays healthy with his ADP sitting around 28th overall in the RB16, to me, James Conner is a slam dunk at the position that he's being drafted, and I'm willing to accept the risk from his injury history.
Yeah, so he's starting to creep up. When the draft season started, James Conner was available in the 4th or 5th round, and so many people were like, I don't know. I don't know how you can play fantasy football and not contextualize what happened to the Steelers last year. With Mason Rudolph and Duck Hodges. They literally were not running an NFL style offense. It was like high school. I mean, it was insane what was going on out there. I am willing to throw out the entire 2019 Steelers campaign, all the stats, all the tape, everything, and hope that Ben Roethlisberger can stay healthy this year. If he does, then we know James Conner is going to be a smash. I mean, James Conner is the guy that Mike Tomlin and this Steelers staff wants to feature when they commit to a guy, whether it's D'Angelo Williams, whether it is Le'Veon Bell. It's been other guys who just suck, Jalen Samuels. They committed to Benny Snell. I mean, they just love committing to one running back. You don't see that in today's NFL very often. So to get a guy like James Conner, who has paths to 90% of the running back touches in what should be a much, much, much better offense than last year, if Ben Roethlisberger can stay on the field, I mean, yeah, it's just a no-brainer. And I wish he was still available in the 4th round. I wish he was still available even in the late 3rd round. But now I think we're going to have to go early 3rd round probably to get James Conner. And I'm still okay with that. Al doing videos like this, though, is not going to help the cause.
Well, I mean, look, before I did any videos, his ADP went from like 42 up to where it is now at about 28. I don't really see him rocketing past a bunch of different players. You look at the I've got the ADP for high stakes leagues right now on the board, and you look at some players that are being selected ahead of him. It's going to be hard for him to really jump those guys. I mean, I would personally take him ahead of Gurley. I would take him ahead of Clyde Edwards-Helaire. There's a lot of question marks with these guys. Austin Eckler, Aaron Jones, with the players that they're fighting and the offenses that they're fighting in terms of productivity. Nick Chubb fighting Kareem Hunt behind him, where James Conner, as you said, based on the philosophy of the coaching staff, should get the majority of the carries. Now, looking at some later ADP guys that you like, and I've really warmed to this first one a lot. I was on one of the other guys that you had later, and then another thing made a lot of sense about the third guy that you wanted to talk about. The first one is Zach Moss for Buffalo, the rookie that they drafted, who's going to, in the coach's words, take over. So if you believe coach speak, he's going to be taking over the Frank Gore role. And that Frank Gore role, if you had Singletary last year, was a really annoying role. And now you've got a younger, similar style runner with a lot more bounce and wiggle to him than Frank Gore has at 78 years old, who can maybe do some things. You also have a quarterback that might take some rushing touchdowns away from Devin Singletary. But the difference in ADP between Singletary and Moss, I think, is the one thing that stands out as would, to me, be the most attractive thing to you. And I want you to talk about that. When you've got a starting running back with a guy who has a defined, carved-out role behind him, who's one play away from taking over the whole enchilada, is that the thing that attracts you most to somebody like Zach Moss?
Yeah, Al asked me for like running backs that I like, and you can notice that I skipped over like the entire middle rounds, and that's not by accident. Like at every middle round point, I prefer a wide receiver or a tight end or even maybe a quarterback over the running back. And, Pat Kerrane's done a lot of work on running back hit rates. Historically, between rounds 4 and 6 has the same historical hit rate as the guys going between rounds 7 and 10. So yeah, I'm skipping over on purpose all those guys that are going in rounds 4 through 6. And yeah, Zach Moss is one of my favorite later round guys. You can typically get him in the 10th round or so. Frank Gore got 11 touches per game last year, and that was even with him being phased out down the stretch. He also got 18 carries from inside the 10-yard line last year, and everybody likes to say, oh, well, Josh Allen's going to steal it all. Frank Gore got 18 carries from inside the 10-yard line. Of course, he accumulated negative yardage and just 2 touchdowns on those 18 carries from inside the 10-yard line. Zach Moss is going to do a lot more than that. And honestly, I mean, look, I'm no talent guy, but Devin Singletary was a 3rd-round pick. Zach Moss was a 3rd-round pick. I don't think it's out of the realm of outcomes for Zach Moss to move ahead of Devin Singletary at some point this season. It's at least possible. And then we also have injury upside. If Devin Singletary were to go down, we know Zach Moss would be the feature guy. So I think there's enough standalone value in Zach Moss to be just crush a 10th round ADP. And then there's other paths, injury and just simply taking over for Devin Singletary, that are at least possible as well. And on this Buffalo team, which I think will be very good and win 10, 11, 12 games.
To me, it's also about that ADP gap. You talked about where you can get Zach Moss versus where you have to get Devin Singletary. Devin Singletary with an ADP around 50, as you guys can see on the screen, and Zach Moss between 100 to 125 is where his ADP is sitting, about 117 right now, I believe. So the difference in price that you have to pay with similar upside and a built-in floor with that Frank Gore role is a pretty solid one. And then you have two others that you wanted to talk about. The first one we will start with is going to be Tevin Coleman for the San Francisco 49ers, as he is sitting behind one of your favorites, one of your nephews, actually, Raheem Mostert, who you would think that Uncle Adam could have talked to him and told him that it's probably not a great idea for an older running back without any sort of draft pedigree or investment from the team to demand a trade.
Yeah, I mean, he wanted 1.5 million more a year, which, obviously to all of us and me is an incredible amount of money, but to Smith's life and to NFL players, easy. 1.5 million, 1.5 million is nothing. So I think they actually might give it to him. Like, that's all he wants is another 1.5 million. But no, I don't think he'll be traded. And I think Raheem Mostert is, I was referring to team preseason. I mean, this dude was just an absolute print fest in preseason DFS. I never thought that it would get to a point where he was like a featured player on a Super Bowl caliber team. He also doesn't really catch passes. And honestly, this Kyle Shanahan and his coaches love Tevin Coleman. Like, I don't think Tevin Coleman's very good. I don't think a lot of real NFL football people think Tevin Coleman's very good, but Kyle Shanahan brings this guy everywhere he goes. Atlanta, San Francisco. He loves Tevin Coleman. And Tevin Coleman was hurt last year when Raheem Mostert was just going ham. And, without a real pass game role, I mean, the ADP gap, you talked about it with Singletary and Moss. I think it's even more egregious between Mostert and Tevin Coleman. I think that there's a real chance at 50-50, and I could see Tevin Coleman even sneaking his head in front and getting 60-40 here, regardless of the trade demands. So, yeah, to me, Tevin Coleman is just another one of these kind of leverage guys. And honestly, like, the way real NFL has gone, where every team is now using two backs, like understanding how the number two back is going to be used, it's so much more important than it used to be in football, where, I mean, in like the early 2000s, or even like 10 years ago, it was like, well, the guy's just the number two back, we can ignore him. Like, that's not the case anymore. All these guys, a lot of these guys we're talking about, Zach Moss and Tevin and whoever else you want to take in the 10th, 11th, 12th round, like the number two running backs in today's NFL certainly have value.
I agree with you. And so talking about that ADP, Tevin Coleman was at 109, right around here, right around the middle to late June. And you had Mostert up in the 45 range, and then all of a sudden he announces that he wants to trade, and you can see the plot graph where he's kind of fallen down a little bit after the 50th pick, and we've seen Tevin Coleman jump up from 109 to 88, so a big 20 spot ADP jump for him. The last player that we want to talk about on this video is something that I kind of took a little bit of heat for. There was a industry draft that I did, and it's a high stakes draft as well with a bunch of heavy hitters, and I went with a 0 RB strategy. And so I was left to take a couple of guys a little bit later, and I wanted to make sure I got my guys who had the possibility of massive upside. One of them was Tony Pollard, just in case something happens to Zeke. We know what Tony Pollard can do. So he was one of those players. And the other one was Madison from Minnesota, who I think is a fantastic player and is one Dalvin Cook holdout because he was in a position where he's in the final year of his contract, and running backs do hold out nowadays, and they're willing to sit out, and they just have to show up in week 11. If Dalvin Cook holds out, how good is Alexander Madison?
Yeah. First of all, yes, Alexander Madison would smash in that spot. However, the new CBA makes it even harder for running backs or for anybody to hold out. They won't accrue a year if they don't show up for camp. I mean, it's ridiculous. I don't know how the NFLPA signed this.
But they can sit for 11 weeks. They can come to camp, right, and say, hey, I've got a migraine, I can't work out today. But they've reported, they can be in the building and say, you know what, guys, I got this migraine, I'm dizzy, I can't work out. Because you can't show a migraine on something, or, you can't prove that it's something that they have. They're in camp, and then they just sit for 11 weeks.
Yeah, the Scottie Pippen.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll see. I mean, Dalvin Cook has absolutely no leverage. He's been hurt. Alexander Madison is very good. Mike Boone, the number 3 back, # team preseason, is awesome. But yeah, I think Alexander Madison, when I talk about 0 RB or guys I want to target later, I hope that they have some standalone value. And I think Tony Pollard might struggle. I don't know. It's hard for me. I'm a little bit lower on Tony Pollard, but I think Alexander Madison will have some standalone value because they don't want to use Dalvin Cook for 80-90% of the snaps. Even when Dalvin Cook was on fire last year, he was still only playing 65 or 70% of the snaps. So I think Alexander Madison has some standalone value of Dalvin Cook, a significant injury history. There's some chance, I guess, that Dalvin Cook holds out, but based on the new CBA, based on what happened to Le'Veon Bell, based on what happened to Melvin Gordon, I'm not sure that he'll actually execute that. But yeah, Alexander Mattison is just going to produce when he has chances. And I think quietly, even though people think Dalvin Cook has the same role as Ezekiel Elliott and Christian McCaffrey and Saquon Barkley, he does not. Dalvin Cook is going to be a 65-70% of the snap kind of player.
Fair enough. Those are the guys that we like. Those are 6 running backs for you guys to maybe focus on in your fantasy football drafts as we approach fantasy draft month. If you want more from Adam, all of his stuff is on establishtheRun.com. There's a link down below in the comments, as well as a promo code for 10% off at checkout. I will see you guys on the next video. Best of luck to you, and stay safe out there. Bye.
He's a legend.